Hi, everybody. My name's Travis, and this is the Daily Travesty. And this is the first of what I hope to be many episodes of Art of War, a YouTube show where I talk about the various different pieces of artwork that I like from the game Flesh and Blood. The piece that I'd like to start with is my favorite art in the whole game, and actually one of my favorite cards. I think it's one of the most interesting cards mechanically. It is a leg piece called Valiant Dynamo. I remember specifically the first time I ever saw this card. I'd been playing the game for a couple of weeks, and I had a Bravo deck that I was playing in Blitz. And I played against an opponent who I believe they were playing Kasai, and they flipped up their armor. And I had seen a lot of the warrior equipment before because I was also interested in Dorinthia. So Courage of Bladehold, yeah, whatever. Arcanite Skullcap, sure, whatever. And then I got to the leg piece, and I remember just being blown away by this. My opponent had a cold foil Valiant Dynamo, and I was like, what is this? And I specifically remember swearing in that moment. And I don't swear a ton when I talk, but I was like, this is a fucking nice card. And the way that this piece of art comes together, I find it's just so evocative. It really, really inspires the image that it's trying to create. This warrior dressed in not super heavy armor, kind of light armor. You can see a little bit of chainmail in there, leather boots and whatnot. But basically, this warrior who is thundering through the battlefield, cutting people left and right. You can see the blood splatter coming off of their blade. And it really evokes this idea that this warrior is fast, right? They're moving quickly. The word dynamo, which is a really weird choice. But anyway, the word dynamo essentially is like an electricity generator, I believe. It's a really high energy card, and it evokes this image of a high energy warrior who probably isn't the strongest or the most well armored, but they're using their maneuverability in combat to gain an advantage. And I really like that. I really like that the feel of the card is tied to the mechanics. Obviously, this card gets better the more times you can give your weapons go again and attack multiple times in a turn. And I think thematically, the way the card fits the mechanics is really exciting. In preparation for this video and in appreciation of the piece of artwork that I enjoy so much, I tried to get in contact with the artist and was actually able to contact them through ArtStation. Pavel, Chuvin, apologize if I said your name wrong. And they were kind enough to answer some questions I had about Valiant Dynamo. At first, I was contacting them to try and get a print of this so I could put it up on the wall, but they said that they didn't have any assets with them that they were able to give out. But they were kind with their time, and they told me a little bit about the process they used for the card. This is a completely CG piece of art, so it's not a piece of art that was created as a painting or drawing or something like that. Entirely in Photoshop, so crafted and sketched and drawn in Photoshop. I was able to ask Pavel a little bit about their process, and in particular, this card, Valiant Dynamo, and how it so vividly captures the motion of someone running. And I was a little bit curious about that. Like, how do you do that in a piece of art? And they said, basically, it's the lighting, dynamic lighting, and a little bit of how the different parts of it are blurred. And we can see that here, that the back leg is a little bit out of focus, a little bit blurred. And we have in the forefront this very, very clear right leg. And in addition to that, I feel like the motion of the rocks underneath, right? You can actually see where there's these waves of rock and dust being pushed to either side. It looks like there's people in the background falling. So we can imagine this character running, slashing people as they go, and people just like slowly falling in the background, but the warrior has already moved on to their next target. One of the other cards that I really appreciate of Pavel's is the Null Rune Gloves, which is kind of a card that I think gets overlooked. It's just a junky piece of Null Rune that you throw in if your class doesn't have anything better. So warriors in particular sometimes play gloves. And the card just sits there. It's a lot of browns and tans. So it's not a piece of art that necessarily pops out of the page, just sitting there on the field. But you should spend a little bit more time looking at this card the next time someone flips it up against you. Or if you have one in your collection, go take a look. The details on this card are absolutely stunning. All the little tiny leather work with the runes. Some of them are glowing. We can see again that use of blurring and motion where it looks like whoever is wielding these gloves is being attacked by a spell, or maybe that's the torch in their hand. I'm not sure, but it conveys a sense of motion. And at the same time, we see the character's right hand reaching for a dagger, almost like the gloves are protecting them from some spell and they're about to use their dagger to kill whatever magic user they're currently faced off against. This piece is absolutely stunning, and it's something that I really, really disregarded until actually I was making this video and I looked up other pieces of art by Pavel. And when the full HD version of the Null Rune gloves came across my screen on the Fab TCG website, I was like, wow, I don't think I've ever actually spent any time looking at this card, and it is absolutely beautiful. So another really fine example of Pavel's work. In addition to the Valiant Dynamo, the Null Rune gloves, we also get Achilles Accelerator. Really, really nice piece showing that motion again, right? We see the character running really quickly. Pavel's also done Bracers of Belief, Crackerjacks, Dreamweavers, Heart of Ice, Quelling Slippers, Ravenous Meat Axe, Teklo Foundry Heart. A lot of pieces of equipment. I was curious about this, so I asked Pavel why it is that most of their artwork that they've done for the game is centered around equipment and if there was a reason for that. They said that they actually think that they're quite good at working on game props, and they're known for this, which is why they get this kind of work more often than things like illustrations or character art. Pavel works for a studio, and I assume they do some work with video games. And so working on different game props and stuff that might be part of the equipment or the background for characters in video games is definitely up Pavel's alley. And I can see how that ports over to equipment pieces in Flesh and Blood. And Pavel was actually kind enough to supply me with some other initial sketches for Valiant Dynamo, ones that maybe they presented to LSS and LSS got to pick between, or maybe some initial concept art that then got refined into the piece that we know now. I think it's really neat looking at the progression of these various pieces. You can definitely see some common themes. We see a little bit of chainmail in the first piece, that same sense of motion with the running, the blade outstretched. The second piece has much more ornate knee guards. I guess that's what you call that, with like almost this like face, this like monster face with a giant nose. Less of a sense of motion there, and we definitely don't see the finer details like the blood splatter or the rocks being pushed aside. And this final piece here looks pretty close to the finished product. I can see that the character in this one is a little bit stockier. The angles are a little bit different, but we see most of the same elements. We see the blade, we see the blood splatter, we see the rocks being pushed aside. And then Pavel in the studio would have gone back, added some finer details, refined it a little bit into, the amazing piece of artwork that I love the most in Flesh and Blood. Why do I want to talk about the artwork from Flesh and Blood more? Some of the artwork here is the most amazing fantasy artwork I've ever seen. And the artwork is one of the key pieces that drew me to the game and keeps me playing. I find that as I play the game more and try to play at more of a competitive level, I see the same cards over and over again. The cards that are in the meta decks, the cards that are really powerful. And some of those cards are really stunning, but there's a whole catalog of pieces of art that never really get talked about, either because the cards they're on are kind of junky or those cards don't get played in any of the meta decks. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to focus on my favorite pieces of artwork from various different levels of cards. In particular, this is a way for me to go through my binders of cards that I never look at and just spend some extra time with them, spend a little bit more time with my collection, and celebrate one of the things that brought me into the game.